For 5 years. I worked late nights at Stellaris Marketing to fund his architectural fantasies, believing we were building a future together. That illusion shattered the second the bus from Portland hissed to a stop. I watched the doors open, expecting a smile. But instead, I saw my husband wrapped in the arms of a stranger. He froze when our eyes met, and I knew my marriage was over before I even stepped out of the shadows. My name is Elena Foster, and on that Tuesday evening, my life was measured in the rhythmic tapping of rain against the glass of the Stellaris marketing office in Seattle. It was 6 o'clock, and the building was nearly silent. I sat alone at my desk, the glow of the monitor illuminating the exhaustion etched into my reflection in the window. My stomach gave a loud, demanding growl, a sharp reminder that I had skipped lunch to save $15 and to ensure this quarterly report was on the manager's desk by morning. My phone buzzed against the hard laminate of the desk. I picked it up, my eyes softening as I saw Derek's name. The message was brief. Running late. Bus delayed out of Portland. Don't worry about picking me up. I'll grab a cab. Love you. I smiled, a reflex that felt heavy on my tired face. He was always trying to save me the trouble, or at least, that is what I told myself. I typed back a quick confirmation, but I had already made up my mind. I would not let him take a cab. Cabs were expensive, and more importantly, I wanted to see him. I wanted to surprise him. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. We had been married for 5 years. For 5 years. I had been the anchor while he tried to sail. I paid the rent for our cramped apartment. I juggled the credit card debt that seemed to multiply every time he needed new drafting software or a ticket to a networking gala. Derek was a freelance architect, a man of grand visions and artistic temperament. But visions did not pay the electric bill. I wore the same winter coat I had bought 3 years ago and brought leftovers to work every day so he could maintain the image of a successful creative professional. I believed in him. I believed that my sacrifice was simply the concrete foundation upon which we were building a magnificent future. Just as I packed my bag, my phone rang again. It was a local number I did not recognize. Mrs. Foster, a dry, professional voice spoke before I could say hello. This is the office of Thorne and Associates. The caller informed me they were contacting me regarding the execution of a will for my step-aunt Vivian. I frowned, confusion clouding my mind. Aunt Vivian was a bitter memory, a recluse who had cut ties with the family years ago. She was known for her harsh tongue and her frugality, living in a dilapidated house and complaining about the price of milk. There must be a mistake, I said, clutching the phone. Vivian didn't have, she didn't have anything to leave anyone. I assure you, Mrs. Foster, everything is in order, the voice replied smoothly. We need you to come in tomorrow morning. I hung up, feeling a strange mixture of skepticism and anxiety. Aunt Vivian leaving a will seemed absurd. Yet, as I walked to the elevator, a fragile hope flickered in my chest. Maybe she had left a few $1,000s. Enough to pay off the Visa card, enough to finally fix the grinding noise in the car. My mood lifted slightly, swinging between the stress of our current poverty and the wild possibility of a small windfall. On the way to the station, I stopped at the supermarket. I decided to be reckless. I bought a thick ribeye steak, a bottle of red wine that cost more than $12, and fresh herbs to make the truffle mashed potatoes Derek loved. It was a significant portion of our weekly grocery budget, but tonight felt special. He was coming home. We could eat a decent meal and talk about the future. I drove our old sedan toward the central bus station. The heater rattled violently, blowing lukewarm air that smelled of dust and burning oil. I gripped the steering wheel, my heart swelling with a blinding, devoted love. I was willing to work myself to the bone, to drive this junk car, to skip meals, all because I believed in the man waiting for me at the end of the line. The bus station was a chaotic assault on the senses. It was noisy, filled with the roar of engines and the smell of diesel fumes. I parked and walked toward the arrival platform, the wind cutting through my thin coat. I bought a cup of cheap coffee from a vending machine to warm my hands. Instead of standing by the curb where he might see me instantly, I found a spot in a secluded corner, shielded from the wind by a concrete pillar. I wanted to watch him step off the bus. I wanted to see that look of relief wash over his face when he realized his wife was there to take care of him. The massive blue bus turned the corner of the station terminal, its headlights cutting through the grime and the gloom of the Seattle evening. It approached the platform with a heavy, mechanical groan, and as it slowed to a halt, the air brakes released a high-pitched screech that tore through the damp air. The sound was agonizing, like a banshee wailing, and it sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold wind. It felt like a warning, a jagged noise signaling that something terrible was about to arrive. The passengers began to shuffle off, a stream of tired faces and heavy luggage. I stood on my toes, craning my neck over the heads of the people in front of me, my eyes darting frantically from face to face. I was looking for the gray wool coat I had bought him 2 Christmases ago. My heart was beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs, eager to see the man I had spent the last 5 years building my life around. Then, the pneumatic doors hissed open one last time. Derek stepped out, but he was not alone. My breath hitched in my throat. Walking right beside him, practically fused to his side, was a woman I had never seen before. She was stunning in a way that made you feel instantly inadequate, with cascading red hair that caught the station lights and a tailored beige trench coat that looked expensive. Her name, I would later learn, was Chloe. She was not walking behind him like a stranger, nor beside him like a colleague. She was clinging to his arm with both hands, her body pressed intimately against his bicep. As soon as their feet hit the concrete pavement, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. They did not look for luggage. They did not look for a taxi. Instead, they turned into each other. Derek dropped his bag and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her flush against him. Chloe buried her face in the crook of his neck, her hands clutching the back of his coat. It was a hug of possession, of deep familiarity, the kind of embrace that spoke of shared secrets and nights spent together. It was far more than friendly. It was undeniably, heartbreakingly intimate. My body went numb. The cheap paper cup of coffee in my hand buckled under the sudden, convulsive grip of my fingers, hot liquid spilling over my knuckles and dripping onto my shoes. I did not feel the burn. I felt nothing but a hollow, ringing silence in my ears. I stepped out from behind the concrete pillar that had been my shelter. My legs felt like lead, but I forced them to move. I walked straight toward them, my eyes locked on my husband's back. "Do you know her?" My voice was trembling, barely a whisper, but in the sudden quiet of the lull between announcements, it carried clearly. Derek froze. His body went rigid in Chloe's arms. He spun around, and the color drained from his face so fast it looked like he was about to faint. He stood dead still on the first step of the bus platform, his eyes wide and terrified as they met mine. The blood had left his lips, leaving them pale and trembling. Chloe released him, but she did not jump back in guilt. She let her hands slide off him slowly, almost reluctantly. She turned to look at me, and there was no fear in her eyes. Instead, she looked me up and down with a sharp, calculating gaze. She took in my frizzy hair, my old coat, the coffee stain on my hand, and her lips curved into a smirk that was both challenging and scrutinizing. She was sizing up the competition and finding it lacking. Derek stammered, his hands waving uselessly in the air as he tried to construct a reality that did not exist. "Elena, I didn't think you were coming." He swallowed hard, his eyes darting between me and the redhead. This is Chloe. She's a potential client. We met at the seminar." He laughed nervously, a high-pitched sound that grated on my ears. She gets terrible motion sickness. Elena, just awful. The bus ride was bumpy. I was just helping her off. She felt faint. She just needed to lean on me for a second. He looked at me with pleading eyes, begging me to be the naive wife he thought I was. The lie was so clumsy, so insulting in its transparency. You do not embrace a client with that kind of hunger because they are dizzy. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing my husband's face. I did not scream. I did not throw the rest of my coffee in his face. I simply tightened my jaw. "I see," I said. I nodded coldly, my face a mask of indifference. But inside, amidst the noise of the bus station and the smell of exhaust, the foundation of my marriage turned to dust. The Elena who had driven here full of love was gone. The woman standing there now was someone entirely new, and she was already beginning to calculate. The drive home was a study in suffocation. The air inside our sedan felt heavy, thickened by the lies Derek was pumping into it. He refused to let the silence settle, filling the space with a manic energy that made my skin crawl. He talked about networking synergy and modernist aesthetics, words he usually reserved for investors, not his wife. "She is brilliant." "Really?" Derek said, his hands gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly. "Chloe has connections in the Pearl District. If this project goes through..." "Elena, it is everything we have been waiting for." I said nothing. I just watched the windshield wipers slice through the rain, back and forth, like a pendulum counting down time. When we finally walked into our apartment, the first thing Derek did was pull his phone from his pocket. He typed something rapidly, his thumbs moving in a blur, and then placed the device face down on the kitchen counter. That single, silent motion, the screen hidden against the laminate, screamed louder than his entire monologue in the car. The next morning, I did not go to Stellaris Marketing. I called in sick, my voice flat and unconvincing, and drove straight to the address the law firm had given me. Thorne and Associates was located in a glass tower that seemed to pierce the gray Seattle sky. Julian Thorne, the senior partner, was a man who seemed carved out of expensive mahogany and steel. He was in his 50s, wearing a suit that likely cost more than my car, and his eyes were sharp, devoid of pity but full of intelligence. "Please, sit down. Mrs. Foster," Julian said, sliding a thick leather binder across his desk. "I will get straight to the point. Your step-aunt Vivian was not who you thought she was." I frowned, my hands clutching my purse. "She was a recluse who lived on coupons. She was a recluse who owned 6 apartment complexes in downtown Portland and a substantial portfolio of commercial real estate," Julian corrected, his voice devoid of irony. "Vivian was a shark, Mrs. Foster, and she has left it all to you." My breath left my body. Julian began to list the assets. A portfolio valued at over $15 million, a historic villa on the outskirts of the city, stocks, bonds. It was a fortune that made my head spin. But then, Julian raised a hand. "There is a condition," he said, his gaze intensifying. Vivian was adamant. "This inheritance is to remain a secret. It is classified as your separate property. It does not commingle with your marital assets unless you explicitly choose to transfer it. And she left you a personal note explaining why." He handed me a cream-colored envelope. I opened it, my fingers trembling. Vivian's handwriting was spidery but forceful. "Elena, love makes women blind. Money makes men visionary. Guard this with your life until you are sure the man in your bed isn't just sleeping with your wallet. Beware the gold diggers, darling. They don't always wear skirts." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Gold diggers. The image of Derek's terrified face at the bus station flashed in my mind, followed by the calculating smirk on Chloe's lips. I don't know what to say," I whispered. "Say nothing," Julian advised, leaning forward. "Go home. Look at your life. Look at your finances. If your marriage is solid, this money is a blessing. If it is not, well, this money is your armor. I left the office in a daze, but by the time I reached our apartment building, the shock had cooled into a hard, cold knot of suspicion. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Derek was out, supposedly meeting a contractor. I entered the apartment and went straight to the second bedroom, which served as Derek's home office. Usually, I respected his privacy, believing in the sanctity of his creative space. Today, I tore it apart. I opened the bottom drawer of his desk, where he kept the boring paperwork he claimed to handle. I found a stack of bank statements from our joint savings account, the one I contributed 90% of the funds to. I sat on the floor and began to trace the numbers. It was not one large sum. It was the pattern that was sickening. $200 here, $300 there, all cash withdrawals, and they all happened in the same zip code in North Portland. I closed my eyes, recalling the moment at the bus station when Chloe had reached into her bag to check her phone. A business card had been clipped to the strap of her purse, Lux Interiors, North Portland branch. The withdrawals matched her neighborhood perfectly. Derek wasn't buying architectural supplies. He was funding a lifestyle he couldn't afford in a city he claimed he was visiting for work, with a woman he claimed was a stranger. I sat there on the floorboards, surrounded by the paper trail of his betrayal. The grief I expected did not come. Instead, a cold, clinical clarity washed over me. I was not just a heartbroken wife anymore. I was a woman with $15 million and a very clear enemy. I hired a private investigator named Miller because he was the only one within my budget who did not look like he drank on the job. He charged me $300 a day, a sum that made me wince, but I needed eyes where mine could not reach. While Miller tracked my husband, I played the role of the unsuspecting wife. I cooked Derek's favorite pot roast. I ironed his shirts. I asked him how his meetings went with a smile plastered on my face, but every time he leaned in to kiss me goodbye, nausea rose in my throat like bile. His touch, once the source of my comfort, now felt like a layer of grease I could not scrub off. 3 days later, Miller sent a digital folder to my secure email. I opened it while sitting in my car during my lunch break. The images on the screen made my stomach turn. There was Derek, wearing the suit I had bought him for our anniversary, walking through a luxury model home in the West Hills with Chloe. They looked like the perfect power couple. In another photo, they were clinking glasses of champagne at a waterfront restaurant where the appetizers cost more than my weekly grocery bill. I was eating a soggy tuna sandwich while looking at my husband feasting on lobster with another woman. The financial betrayal went deeper than just expensive dinners. That evening, while Derek was in the shower, I went through his wallet. I found a credit card tucked behind his driver's license. It was a supplementary card issued under my main account, one I had never authorized. I logged into the bank app on my phone, my hands shaking so hard I mistyped the password twice. When the balance loaded, I gasped. $15,000. He had maxed out the limit in 3 months. The statement was a catalog of his infidelity luxury hotels, jewelry stores, and endless charges at boutiques that sold the kind of clothes Chloe wore. I heard the water turn off in the bathroom. I quickly shoved the wallet back into his pants pocket and stepped out into the hallway, intending to retreat to the kitchen. But then I heard his voice. He was on the phone, likely assuming the sound of the bathroom fan would mask his conversation. I pressed my ear against the cold wood of the door. "Babe." "You have to be patient," Derek said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Just bear with the fool for a few more months. I know she is annoying, but I need her credit score to hold up a little longer. Once I lock down this investment, once the money hits my account. We will kick her to the curb. I promise." I backed away, my feet silent on the carpet. The cruelty of his words stripped away the last remnants of my denial. There was no architectural project. There was no struggling artist. Derek was a parasite. He was not just cheating on me, he was feeding on me, draining my finances and my youth while mocking me to the woman he was spending my money on. I sat in the living room in the dark, clutching the copy of Aunt Vivian's will against my chest. The pain was searing, a hot iron pressing against my heart. But I did not cry. Tears were a luxury for women who had hope, and I had none left for this marriage. I looked at the legal document in my hand, the paper crisp and authoritative. I was not a fool. I was a millionaire. And Derek was a man standing on a trap door, waiting for me to pull the lever. I opened my laptop and navigated to my personal bank website. I opened a new high-yield savings account solely in my name. With a few clicks, I transferred the remaining $4,000 from our joint checking account money I had saved for a down payment on a house into my new secret vault. It was a small sum compared to my inheritance, but it was the principal. I closed the laptop and watched the rain streak the window. He wanted money. He wanted fame. He wanted to be the great architect of his own destiny. I decided right then that I would give him exactly what he deserved. I would not scream. I would not fight. I would simply build a masterpiece of ruin, brick by brick, and watch him lock himself inside. I decided to test the waters over a quiet dinner the following Tuesday. I pushed my fork around my plate, making a show of looking distressed, before I finally looked up at Derek. "Honey," I began, keeping my voice small and trembling. I have some bad news. Rumors are flying at Stellaris Marketing. Management says profits are down. They might be cutting salaries by 20% next month. I'm terrified." I waited for comfort. I waited for him to reach across the table and tell me that we would figure it out together, that his architecture work would pick up the slack. Instead, Derek dropped his fork with a loud clatter, his face twisted into a mask of irritation and disbelief. "Are you kidding me?" he snapped, his eyes narrowing. 20%, Elena. Do you have any idea what that does to our budget? I am on the verge of a breakthrough. I need stability right now, not this incompetence. He stood up and paced the small kitchen, running a hand through his hair. "You need to fight for your pay. Elena, don't just sit there and take it. I can't be worrying about the electric bill when I am trying to create art. It is selfish of you to bring this stress home to me." I looked down at my plate to hide the cold satisfaction in my eyes. His reaction confirmed everything. He did not see me as a partner. He saw me as a paycheck. He was a tick, panic-stricken at the thought of the blood supply running dry. The next day, I initiated the second phase of my plan. I met with Julian Thorne, and together we set up a shell company named Phoenix Holdings. Through this entity, I purchased the derelict brick building on the east side of the city, the one Derek had spent years driving past, fantasizing about turning it into a mixed-use masterpiece. It cost me $2 million, a fraction of my inheritance. But the price of the trap was irrelevant. 2 days later, Phoenix Holdings contacted Derek. When he got the email, he practically vibrated with excitement. He ran into the living room, shoving his phone in my face. "Elena, look at this, a private investment firm. They saw my portfolio online. They want me to be the lead architect for the East Side renovation project They said I have unmatched vision." I feigned a gasp of joy, clapping my hands together. "Oh, Derek, that is amazing. I knew they would see your talent eventually." He was already texting Chloe. I knew it because he was smiling at the screen with that sickening secret grin. He was likely telling her that their payday had arrived, that he was finally the big shot he pretended to be. His ego was so inflated that he did not question why a mysterious holding company would hire a freelancer with 0 completed commercial projects. The contract arrived by courier the next morning. It was thick, professional, and deadly. I sat next to him on the sofa as he flipped through the pages, his eyes skimming over the dense legal jargon. "It says here the budget is $5 million, Derek said, his voice breathless. $5 million. Elena, the fee structure. It is incredible. You should sign it immediately," I urged him, resting my head on his shoulder. Before they change their minds. But make sure you check the liability clause, just to be safe. He waved his hand dismissively. It is standard boilerplate. Elena, don't be such a worrier. This is how the big leagues operate. He did not read the clause on page 42. The clause that stated if the project was not completed on a strict, nearly impossible timeline, or if the architect failed to secure the necessary permits within 30 days, the architect would be personally liable for liquidated damages amounting to $300,000. Furthermore, the contract required a personal guarantee, backed by any and all personal assets. Derek believed we owned our apartment. He believed the monthly payments I made were mortgage installments on a home we held joint title to. In reality, I had never bought the place. I had been renting it for 5 years because we never had the credit score to buy. But he was so detached from our finances, so confident in his assumption that I handled the boring stuff, that he didn't hesitate. I am going to be famous, he whispered, uncapping his pen. You deserve it, honey. I cooed softly. Sign it. Make your mark. He pressed the pen to the paper and signed his name with a flourish, sealing his fate. He was pledging assets he did not have, for a project he did not have the skill to complete, to a client who was actually his vengeful wife. I watched the ink dry, a gentle smile on my lips, but inside, I felt nothing but the chill of the grave I was digging for him. I am so proud of you, I said. And for the first time in weeks, I almost meant it. I was proud of how easily he had walked into the cage. With the Phoenix Holdings contract signed, Derek's ego swelled to the size of the skyscrapers he dreamed of building. He stopped hiding his absences, merely glossing them over with the flimsiest of excuses. He was constantly jetting off to site inspections or material sourcing meetings that coincidentally took place in luxury resorts along the coast. He walked around our apartment with his chest puffed out, treating me less like a wife and more like a barely tolerated roommate who was lucky to be in his presence. I decided to feed the beast. We should celebrate. I suggested one evening while clearing his dinner plate. A small party. To honor your big break. You should invite your key partners. Maybe that representative from the interior supply firm you mentioned, the one assisting with the sourcing. Derek's eyes lit up. He thought I was being supportive. In reality, I was setting the stage for a farce. He agreed immediately, and that Saturday, our cramped living room was filled with cheap streamers and the smell of the hors d'oeuvres I had spent 5 hours preparing. Chloe arrived 40 minutes late, making an entrance that was calculated to suck the oxygen out of the room. She was wearing a backless black dress that cost more than my car, and she didn't bring a gift. She brought an attitude. Derek introduced her as the senior liaison for Lux Materials, a title as fake as her concern for my hospitality. Oh, Elena, Chloe said, looking around our apartment with a curled lip. This place is just so cozy. I admire how you manage to live with so little space. It must be very humbling. It is home, I said, forcing a shy, submissive smile. Can I get you a drink vodka martini? Very dry. And do try not to bruise the ice, she commanded, turning her back on me to run a hand down Derek's arm. I scurried to the kitchen like a frightened maid. From the corner of the room, Julian Thorne watched the performance over the rim of his glass. I had introduced him as an old college friend of mine, a boring accountant who wouldn't interest someone as visionary as Derek. Julian played the part perfectly, blending into the beige wallpaper, but I saw his sharp eyes recording every touch, every sneer, every moment of disrespect. When I returned with the drinks, Chloe was holding court on my sofa, critiquing the upholstery. Derek, really? She laughed, leaning into him until their shoulders touched. When the first payment comes in from Phoenix, we simply must upgrade this. This fabric is positively scratchy. I don't know how you stand it. It is on the list. Chloe, Derek said, grinning like a schoolboy. Everything is going to change. Right. Elena. Of course, I mumbled, offering Chloe her drink, Whatever makes you happy. Derek. The tension in the room was electric, but only I could feel the current. To them, I was invisible, a piece of old furniture they were planning to discard. As the night wore on, their discreet touches became bolder. A hand on the lower back, a lingering gaze. They were drunk on their own arrogance, believing they were pulling off the heist of the century right under my nose. Then came the crescendo. I was wearing a simple white dress, one of the few nice things I owned. I was walking past Chloe to refill the snack bowl when she suddenly threw her hand out, gesturing wildly as she told a story. Her glass of red wine collided with my hip. The dark crimson liquid splashed across my stomach and down my thighs, staining the white fabric instantly. It looked like a gunshot wound. "Oh my God!" Chloe shrieked, but her hand flew to her mouth to cover a giggle, not a gasp of horror. "I am so clumsy, Elena. I am so sorry. But really, you should have seen me coming. You are always so quiet, sneaking up on people." Derek didn't jump up to help me. He stayed seated, chuckling softly. "It is just a dress." "Elena, don't make a scene." Chloe said she was sorry. I looked down at the ruin of my dress, the cold wine seeping onto my skin. I did not cry. I did not scream. "It is okay," I whispered, keeping my head down. "I will go change. Please, everyone, enjoy yourselves." I walked to the bedroom, closing the door softly behind me. I stripped off the ruined dress and looked at myself in the mirror. My reflection stared back, pale but terrifyingly calm. This was it. This was the last time. I had served them. I had bowed to them, and I had let them trample me. Now, I was done. I put on a pair of jeans and a sweater. As I reached for the doorknob to rejoin the party, I heard voices in the hallway. They must have thought I was crying in the bathroom. "She is pathetic." "Derek," Chloe's voice hissed, dripping with venom. "Did you see her face like a kicked puppy? When are you going to get rid of her? I can't stand coming to this dump." "Soon, babe. Soon," Derek replied, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. "The first draw from Phoenix Holdings is scheduled for next month. $50,000. As soon as that cash hits my account, I am kicking her out. I will tell her I need space for my creative process. She is stupid enough to believe it. Then we can get a real place." I stood frozen, my hand hovering over the cold brass knob. A smile slowly spread across my face. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of the executioner who had just sharpened the blade. Good luck with that. I whispered to the empty room. I opened the door and walked back out, ready to pour them one last round of drinks before the poison set in. The collapse of Derek's world began not with a bang, but with a series of bureaucratic suffocations. The Phoenix Holdings project, which he believed was his ticket to stardom, suddenly hit a wall of invisible obstacles. I had instructed Julian to pull strings at the city permit office, ensuring Derek's applications were buried under a mountain of red tape. The high-end steel and glass he ordered using the account I secretly controlled was marked as back-ordered indefinitely. By the third week, the deadline for the detailed structural blueprints was looming. Derek sat at his desk, his hair disheveled, staring at a blank AutoCAD screen. He was a man of vague concepts, not structural engineering. He could draw a pretty sketch on a napkin, but he had no idea how to calculate load-bearing walls. Panic began to seep out of him like sweat. "I need to hire a freelancer," he announced one evening, pacing the kitchen floor. "I need someone to handle the technical grunt work. It will cost $5,000 up front. Transfer the money to my account tonight." I looked up from the table, where I was pretending to circle job ads in the newspaper. I can't. Derek," I stammered, shrinking into my chair. "I didn't want to tell you because you have been so stressed, but Stellaris let me go. I was fired yesterday." The silence that followed was terrifying. Derek stopped pacing, He turned to me, his face twisting into a sneer of pure disgust. The charming, artistic husband vanished, replaced by a cornered animal. You lost your job. He spat the words out like poison. Now, you chose now to be incompetent. I am on the verge of greatness, and you decide to become a dead weight. I am sorry, I whispered, looking down. I tried. Trying doesn't pay the bills. Elena, he roared, slamming his hand on the counter. You are useless. A millstone around my neck. I should have listened to Chloe. She told me you would drag me down. He grabbed my shoulders, shaking me violently. Fix this. Go borrow money. Go to a loan shark for all I care. Or sell that ugly gold necklace your mother left you. It is just sitting in a box, gathering dust. Sell it. I pulled away from him, clutching my chest. That necklace was the last thing I had of my mother. No, I said, my voice trembling but firm. I won't sell Mom's necklace. We have nothing left. Derek. He looked at me with hatred, realizing he could not bully money out of a stone. He stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I knew exactly where he was going. He was going to call Chloe, and I knew exactly what she would say. My private investigator had already sent me the audio logs of their recent calls. Chloe was getting impatient. She wanted to see the money. Or she was walking. She had told him, I don't date failures. Derek, fix it. Or I am gone. 2 hours later, while I was reading a book in the bedroom, my phone buzzed with a priority alert. It was a notification from the bank that held the title to our car, the only asset we technically owned together, though its value was less than $8,000. Alert loan application approved. Cash out refinance secured against vehicle VIN ending in 492. I opened the details. The digital paperwork had been signed just minutes ago. It required 2 signatures, his and mine. Since I was sitting in my bedroom, miles away from the dealership, there was only one explanation. Derek had forged my signature to get a few $1,000s of quick cash to pay a ghostwriter for his blueprints. He had crossed the line from moral bankruptcy to criminal fraud. I stared at the glowing screen of my phone, and a slow, cold smile spread across my face. He had just handed me the handcuffs. Got you, I whispered into the dark room. The courier arrived at exactly 8 o'clock in the morning. He did not knock. He pounded on the door with the authority of a man delivering a death sentence. Derek, bleary-eyed and unshaven from a sleepless night of panic, opened the door to receive a thick, bonded envelope bearing the crimson seal of Phoenix Holdings. He tore it open right there in the hallway. As he read the cover letter, his knees actually buckled, and he had to lean against the wall to keep from sliding to the floor. The letter was brutal in its brevity. It stated that due to his failure to secure the necessary permits and his inability to produce the structural drawings by the agreed-upon milestone, he was in breach of contract. The penalty clause was effective immediately. Phoenix Holdings was demanding payment of $350,000 within 48 hours, or they would move to seize his personal assets as per the guarantee he had so arrogantly signed. No, this can't be right, Derek whispered, his hands shaking so violently the paper rattled like dry leaves. 350,000. I don't have that. He scrambled for his phone, his fingers fumbling over the screen. He did not call a lawyer. He called Chloe. I watched from the kitchen doorway as he pressed the phone to his ear, his face slick with sweat. Come on, pick up, damn it, he hissed. The call went to voicemail. He dialed again, and again. Finally, his phone chimed with a text message. He stared at it, and I saw the last flicker of hope die in his eyes. Chloe had not just ignored him, she had cut him loose. The message was brief. I heard about the contract breach. I don't date liabilities. Don't contact me again. Derek dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a dull thud. He stood there for a long moment, breathing hard, realizing he was entirely alone in the wreckage he had created. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward me. The transformation was instant and sickening. The man who had screamed at me the night before, calling me a useless burden, vanished. In his place stood a whimpering, terrified boy. He rushed toward me, his eyes wide and pleading. "Elena, honey," he gasped, reaching out to grab my hands. We are in trouble, terrible trouble, but we can fix it, right? We are a team." "You always know what to do. You have to help me." I stepped back, avoiding his touch. I walked over to the sofa and sat down, crossing my legs. On the coffee table, a pot of chamomile tea was steaming. I poured myself a cup, the china clinking softly in the quiet room. I took a slow sip, savoring the warmth, while he stood there trembling, waiting for me to panic with him. I lowered the cup and looked him dead in the eye. "Do you know her?" I asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. It was the exact same question I had asked at the bus station weeks ago, but this time, my voice was not shaking. It was steel. Derek flinched as if I had slapped him. He opened his mouth to lie, but something in my expression stopped him. He saw the wall I had built. He stammered, tears beginning to stream down his face. Yes. Okay, I know her, but it meant nothing. Elena. Nothing, she came onto me at the conference. It was just a fling. I was weak. I was stressed about work, and she was there. But I love you. You are the only one I care about. Please, you have to believe me. He fell to his knees on the rug, clutching at the hem of my jeans. It was a mistake. I will never see her again. I swear, just help me figure this out. We can remortgage the car. Or maybe you can ask your family. Please. Elena. I looked down at him, feeling absolutely nothing. The love I had held for 5 years was not just dead. It was decomposed. I reached under the cushion of the sofa and pulled out a thick manila folder. I tossed it onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy slap. "Open it," I commanded. Derek looked at the folder, then at me. Confusion warring with fear. He reached out with a trembling hand and flipped it open. The photographs spilled out first. Derek and Chloe kissing in the park. Derek buying her a diamond bracelet using my credit. Derek laughing at a dinner that cost $500. Then came the bank statements, highlighted in neon yellow, showing every cent he had stolen from our joint account. And finally, on top, the copy of the loan application from yesterday with my signature forged in his clumsy handwriting. He went still. He stopped breathing. I didn't just suspect. "Derek," I said, my voice calm and terrifyingly even. I knew. I knew from the moment you stepped off that bus. I knew about the credit card. I knew about the cash withdrawals. And I knew about the forgery you committed yesterday. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his terrified gaze. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. And I have been watching you make it every single day. I reached into the folder one last time and pulled out a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored paper. It was the Certificate of Incorporation for Phoenix Holdings. I did not hand it to him. I tossed it onto the coffee table, where it slid across the polished wood and came to a stop right in front of his knees. Read the name at the bottom. "Derek," I commanded. He wiped his tear-stained face with the back of his hand and picked up the document. His eyes scanned the legal jargon, confused at first, until they landed on the line designating the sole proprietor and chairman of the board. His eyes went wide, bulging as if he were being strangled. He looked from the paper to me, his mouth opening and closing in silence. "No," he whispered, his voice cracking. This says Elena Foster." "That's impossible." You are broke. You work in marketing. I am the president of Phoenix Holdings," I said, standing up and towering over him. "I am the investor who hired you, and I am the client who just fired you for incompetence. There were no investors, Derek. There was only me. I built the trap, and you walked right into it because your greed made you blind." He dropped the paper as if it were burning his fingers. He looked at me with absolute horror, finally realizing the magnitude of the game I had been playing. "You set me up," he gasped. "I tested you," I corrected him coldly. "And you failed. You signed a contract with a personal guarantee. You are currently in breach of that contract to the tune of $350,000, but that is the least of your problems." I took a step closer, my shadow falling over him. "You also forged my signature on a federal loan application yesterday. That is bank fraud. That is identity theft. That is a felony that carries a mandatory prison sentence." Derek let out a sound like a wounded animal. He scrambled forward on his knees, reaching for my legs, but I stepped back, looking at him with the same detachment one might feel when looking at a cockroach. "Elena." "Please," he screamed, snot running down his face. "I am your husband. You can't put me in jail. I will do anything we can fix this. I will pay you back. Just give me time. I don't have time," I said, cutting him off. "And I definitely don't have a husband. I have a con artist in my living room." I pointed to the door. "Here are your options. Derek, listen carefully because I will only say them once. Option 1, I hand that evidence over to the police, and you go to prison for fraud and breach of contract. Option 2, you sign the divorce papers I have right here. I pulled the divorce settlement from the bottom of the stack. You leave with nothing. You take on all your personal debts, including the credit cards you maxed out on your girlfriend. You waive any claim to my assets, present or future. You walk out that door with the clothes on your back, and we never speak again." I can't," he sobbed. "Elena, please." "Time is up," I said. I nodded toward the front door. The lock clicked, and the door swung open. Julian Thorne stepped into the apartment. He was not alone. Behind him stood 2 uniformed police officers, their faces stern, hands resting near their belts. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Derek froze, his face draining of all color until he looked like a corpse. "Mrs. Foster," Julian said, his voice calm and sharp. "Is this the individual who forged your signature?" One of the officers stepped forward, the handcuffs on his belt jingling softly. That sound broke Derek completely. "No, police." Derek shrieked, scrambling back toward the table. He grabbed the pen I had left there. I'll sign the papers. Just tell them to wait. Please, Elena, tell them to wait." He didn't even read the divorce decree. He scribbled his signature on the dotted line, his hand shaking so hard he almost tore the paper. He signed his life away to save his skin. I picked up the document and checked the signature. It was valid. I handed it to Julian, who tucked it into his briefcase with a satisfied nod. "Officers," I said, turning to the policeman. "There has been a misunderstanding. I won't be pressing charges today." "But this man was just leaving." The officers nodded and stepped back into the hallway, though they kept their eyes on Derek. Derek slumped against the sofa, gasping for air, thinking he had survived. He looked up at me, a flicker of his old entitlement returning now that the immediate threat of arrest was gone. "Fine," he spat, wiping his face. "I am leaving. I will pack my bags. But you are a monster. Elena, I am taking the TV. I bought that. You didn't buy anything," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that was colder than the rain outside. "And you are not packing. You are leaving now." "I pay rent here," he shouted, trying to regain some ground. "My name is on the lease." "The lease was terminated last week," I replied, a small, cruel smile touching my lips. "The owner sold the apartment, to me. I bought this unit 7 days ago. This is my house. My furniture. My life. You are trespassing." I pointed to the open door, where the cold draft was blowing in. "Get out!" Derek dragged his battered suitcase across the threshold, the plastic wheels scraping against the floorboards with a sound that mimicked a dying gasp. He looked nothing like the arrogant man who had stepped off the bus from Portland weeks ago. His shoulders were slumped, his expensive jacket was wrinkled, and his eyes were hollow with the shock of a man who had reached for a crown and grabbed a handful of barbed wire instead. Outside, the Seattle sky was weeping. The rain came down in relentless, gray sheets, turning the street below into a blurred watercolor of misery. I walked to the glass doors of the balcony on the third floor and watched him exit the building. He stepped onto the sidewalk, shivering instantly as the cold water soaked through his shirt. He did not get far. A sleek red convertible screeched to a halt at the curb, splashing muddy water onto his trousers. The door flew open, and Chloe stormed out. She was not there to save him. She was there to salvage her investment. "You think you can just ignore me?" Chloe screamed, her voice shrill enough to pierce through the drumming of the rain. "You owe me $4,000 for those suits, Derek. My card is maxed out because of you." Derek dropped his suitcase and threw his hands up, his face twisted in a rictus of frustration. "I don't have it," he roared back, his voice cracking. "She took everything, the house, the money, the contracts. She played us. Chloe, she is a witch. You are a loser," Chloe yelled, shoving him hard in the chest. "You told me you were rich. You told me she was stupid. You are the stupid one." They collided in a mess of flailing limbs and screaming accusations. It was a pathetic, ugly spectacle. Two people who believed they were better than the world, now tearing each other apart over scraps in the gutter. I watched them with a profound sense of detachment. The anger that had fueled me for weeks had evaporated, leaving behind a clean, cool silence. I stepped back inside and slid the heavy glass door shut. The lock clicked into place, severing the connection between my sanctuary and their chaos. The screaming was instantly muffled, reduced to a meaningless background hum. I picked up my phone and dialed Julian. He answered on the first ring. "It is done," I said softly. "He is gone. Proceed with the final filing. And Julian, put the East Side building on the market tomorrow. I don't want to keep it. I don't want anything that has his name attached to it, even in a lie. Consider it done. Elena," Julian replied. "Congratulations on your freedom." I hung up and looked around the apartment. It was stripped of his clutter, his pretension, and his lies. It felt vast. I lit the lavender candle on the console table, inhaling the soothing, herbal scent that replaced the stale air of deceit. I walked over to the dining table. My wedding ring was heavy on my finger, a golden shackle I had worn for 5 years. I pulled it off, slowly, feeling the friction against my skin one last time. I placed it on the polished wood. Next to the gold band, I laid down a single piece of paper. It was a one-way plane ticket to Tuscany, Italy. Aunt Vivian had always talked about the olive groves there, about how the sun in Italy could heal even the deepest wounds. I turned off the main lights, leaving only the soft glow of the candle flickering in the dark. I picked up my purse and walked to the door. I did not look back at the empty rooms. I did not check to see if I had forgotten anything. I had everything I needed. I stepped out into the hallway and closed the door firmly behind me. I dropped the keys through the mail slot. They hit the floor on the other side with a final, metallic clatter. My heels clicked rhythmically against the floor of the corridor as I walked toward the elevator. The sound was steady, strong, and confident. I was no longer the wife waiting in the shadows of a bus station. I was Elena Foster, and I was walking into a future that belonged entirely to me. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below, sharing your location and your thoughts on Elena's revenge. If you enjoyed this journey, please make sure to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to me.